Welcome to FMH InsureCast, a podcast created by Farmers Mutual Hail designed to deliver expertise and insights from trusted FMH team members and industry experts. Each new episode will dive into new products, industry updates, and innovative solutions. Let's get to today's topic.
Hello, everybody. Dave DeCap here with another episode of FMH InsureCast. We've got a very informative episode today, so we're going to be bringing out the heavy artillery. As we all know, the American Relief Act of 2025 was signed into law last December of 2024. And as part of that law, among other things, like extending the Farm Bill another year and quite a few other things, there was a $31 billion in aid provided to help offset disaster and economic losses suffered from 2023 to 2024. We're recording this episode on June 30th. So here in one short week, on July 7th, that's the first date where the sign-up opens for the Supplemental Disaster Relief Program, SDRP. So we thought it'd be really beneficial to discuss this disaster aid component of the Relief Act in some more detail, as our listeners are sure to be interested in learning more about this program. And so to do that, we do have the heavy artillery I mentioned before. We've got Ken Ripley, who's a frequent guest, co-host, farmer, regional sales manager, jack of all trades here with FMH. So we'll bring Ken on. And we've also got Tom Sell from Combest Sell and Associates. And Combest Sell represents the Crop Insurance Professionals Association. For those of you that don't know, that's CIPA. And let's bring those guys on and get started. Morning, gentlemen. Afternoon. How are you?
Good morning, Dave.
Good morning.
So if we could, let's just do a real quick introduction. Ken, we'll start with you, and then we'll dive into this thing, if that works.
You bet. Sounds good, Dave. Again, Ken Ripley, Regional Sales Manager for the North Region for Farmers Mutual, and reside out of Blue Earth, Minnesota. So always glad to be on the podcast.
Thank you, Ken. Mr. Sell?
I'm Tom Sell. I do work in Washington, D.C. Have really since 1995 been involved in all the farm bills since then. As advocate for a lot of grower groups, and as you mentioned, represent really an outstanding organization, kind of the best and the brightest among the agents operating throughout the nation, serving farmers first as crop insurance agents. So have been really embedded in this federal crop insurance program since really was involved with my former boss, Larry Combest, as chairman of the Ag Committee in 2000 when we rewrote the Federal Crop Insurance Act under the Ag Risk Protection Act, the ARPA bill of 2000. So love this program and happy to be with you today.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you taking time out of what is a very busy time in DC, in crop insurance, in ag in general. So really appreciate you taking some time here to chat with us. So if you're good, Ken and I, over the next 20, 25 minutes or so, we'll kind of pepper you with questions about SDRP, because there's a lot of questions out there, a lot of kind of unknowns as they are today. So maybe we start easy and start with, I introduced it a little bit, but can we start with kind of an overview of SDRP? Can you kind of bring us up to speed as of today?
Yeah. So SDRP is a $20.78 billion pot of funds appropriated by Congress, like you said, in the end of the year in 2024. And of course, remember, there was also a $10 billion program called ECAP. This was for kind of the rising production costs in the 24 crop year, and that created per acre payments for program crops by planted acre. And so a lot of that has gone out. About 85% of that was teed up in the early part of this year, back in March. And then they still have some remainder to do on that. So after August 15th, they're going to come back and pay that remaining 15% on that. That'll set that $10 billion aside. The $20.78 billion for SDRP is for a traditional kind of crop and livestock loss program. $2 billion of that was earmarked for livestock, and they've already rolled a big portion of that out back in May for the emergency livestock revenue program, which kind of built on top of the livestock forage program. So we can kind of set that aside. The big bulk of what's being done is roughly $18.75 billion left, and that's for a traditional crop program. And, the basic of it, it's supposed to be kind of the best of. When you think back to 17, you had the WIP program, 18, 19, you had WIP plus, 20 and 21, you had ERP phase one, which was
Right.
highly regarded.
Yep.
Everyone loved it. And then the Biden administration kind of went off on a sidetrack, trying to do this more fancy revenue calculation, trying to point it towards small farms. And in the case of the 22 disaster program, they actually did some unconstitutional things or things that have since been ruled unconstitutional by federal courts, trying to, press a thumb on the scale for minority farmers. And there was also a gender-based classification. The Trump administration is throwing all that out, kind of going to a best of approach, really looking at that 2021 phase one and the WIP plus and trying to restructure that in a new program that's going to be really a yield-based addition to what the farmer's level of coverage, the level of crop insurance they bought. It builds on top of that. It's a pretty straightforward indemnification process. Should run a lot smoother, if it's all that that they're kind of talking it up to be. So we'll see very soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so with this rollout, do you expect there's going to be like pre-filled applications like we saw with the prior bills, or is it going to be farmers got to go in and fill out the details on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I do think there's going to be pre-filled applications, particularly kind of running this in a couple of phases as well. So they're saying July 7th, the sign up will begin for those losses that had received an indemnity. In other words, if you bought crop insurance and you already had a loss, a known loss that's been indemnified by a crop insurance company, then they're just going to add to that. And the additions are going to look, I think, very similar. I think they're going to be exactly like. We'll see soon, but I think it's going to be very, very similar, if not exactly like the 2021 program, where remember, like if you bought a 60% insurance policy, you would get plussed up to 85. So you would have a new threshold based on 85. If you bought a 70% policy, that would go to 90. If you bought more than an 80% policy, an 80 or 85, it would go up to 95. And so they recalculate the losses with that added amount on top, and they just pay that difference. They also, in the 2021 program, refunded a portion of the paid premium by that farmer. And I think that's going to be in the mix again this time. So that would be that first tranche for the indemnified losses. And then they come back, and in September, early September, they'll have a sign up for the shallow losses. So maybe you bought a 65% insurance policy and you made 70% of your APH. And so you did not trigger a loss, but you would be covered under this new span of coverage. Those are going to come back in the September timeframe and do that along with quality losses. So kind of two tranches here as well. But the really important point is this, and this is where the Trump administration has been very adamant. It's going to be the exact same methodology. So you can take the methodology that's going to be published this week, presumably, and if you had one of those shallow losses that didn't trigger, you'll be able to take that methodology and determine exactly what the payment would be once that sign up is opened up for you. So I think that's also going to be a benefit.
Nice.
Interesting. Can I follow up on that real quick? There's one piece that was very helpful, by the way. That was very detailed. One of the things in just some of my external reading that I've seen about this is that crop insurance premiums weren't going to be refunded, but you're thinking that may be still in the mix?
I'm thinking so.
Yeah.
I think in 20 and 21 they did it at like 50% of the premium was refunded. I don't know if they'll get that high. And there is another key distinction that I should discuss there as well. So in 20 and 21, they included like area-based policies that on top of your base level of insurance. So think of SCO or ECO, which has obviously blossomed since 20 and 21. Think stacks if you're a cotton farmer. In 20 and 21, they also rebated a portion of that premium. And they also included it in the calculation, which made it difficult to kind of net out those things.
Right.
I think this time around, guys, I feel fairly confident that they are just going to leave the area-based policies out, meaning you're not going to get any premium refunded on that, but it's also not going to count against you. Any indemnification on those policies won't count in your kind of revenue to count that goes against the new threshold of loss. So I think it's much cleaner. And I'm really, again, we'll see, but believing this is the way it's going to work. I think it's going to be a much cleaner and straightforward exercise. And it doesn't create kind of weird incentives, and it doesn't get into the farmer's mind. You have just a pure insurance decision going forward on ECO and SC
Yeah.
stacks and these kind of over the top tools. And you don't have to think about, well, what if they do a disaster program in the future? Is that going to hurt me or harm me? So I think it's a much more cleaner way they're looking at doing it this time around.
Yeah, I'd agree. Especially some of the kickback was, yeah, if I bought ECO, essentially I'm getting a free ECO. Well, and that's why we're doing the premium credits, because otherwise you weren't treating people equally. Well, if it takes it out completely, we may have to get prepared for even more ECO sales there, Dave. So
yeah, exactly. Yep, that's right.
Yeah,
No doubt.
it's a good product.
yeah, it's gone very well. From a calculation standpoint, I mean, is it then, for example, Midwest, we see a lot of 80, 85. Is it, for 95 trigger, is it just essentially going to be going from that level down to your whatever your multi-peril, and it's just picking up that dollars of loss
That's
in that
exactly right.
band? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So in that case, if you bought 85, that's 10%. Now, we all know in insurance kind of actuarial databases, that is the most valuable portion. That's the most likely
Yeah.
to trigger.
Right.
So that's why the premiums are high on those higher levels. So you might not get as big of a band of coverage, but it'll have a very low loss threshold, and I think will cover a lot of folks.
Okay.
And that'll be, you may have mentioned this, but if not, I apologize. That'll be in two tranches as well. They'll do an initial payment and then come back and true up down the road.
Yeah, I
how
think
it's
it
planned?
will be probably a factor when they
Yeah.
do this first July 7th rollout, even on the indemnified losses. They'll want to kind of gauge it and
Mhm.
say, well, you could qualify for a maximum of, let's say, $150 an acre, but we're only going to indemnify a portion of that. Maybe that's 75%. And on top of that, just to be safe so that we don't have to claw back any funds in the future because we run out of money, we may
Right.
only give 75% of that amount. So that's pretty typical of the way they do it. And I think by the time we get to, it'll probably be late in the year. After they do the indemnified losses, then they'll do the non-indemnified and the quality losses that are a little bit more difficult in the September timeframe. I expect they true everything up probably around harvest time, probably in that October, November timeframe.
Gotcha. So similar to ECAP, right? So ECAP
Yeah.
is right, which will be finishing up here soon.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Are there, with this bill, for this disaster program, will there be certain perils that trigger, or is it wider than some of the ones we've seen in the past? I mean, like WIP came out for hurricanes, and next thing you know, we're paying it on drought in the rest of the country. So I
Yeah,
didn't know if that's been defined down, if you know, on that side.
the qualifying losses are still in the statute.
Okay.
And it has things like excessive heat, excessive moisture, freeze, smoke taint. There's all this kind of list of things that are in the statute. And I'll tell you, Ken, the biggest question that I get is, well, what about drought and excessive heat? Because in that statute, it's very specific on drought. It says you have to be in a county that had D2 for 8 weeks or more.
Sure.
But you and I both know that you might have two adjusters adjusting two farms in the same county
Mhm.
that maybe had a real time of excessive heat that a lot of the farmers were calling drought, and maybe it's a crop where one adjuster said, well, this was just a drought loss, and another adjuster may have said it was excessive heat and wind. And we've tried to flag this for USDA saying, if that particular county did not meet the D2 for 8-week threshold, you don't want the difference between the way the adjuster,
Flagged it.
documented these two losses. You don't want that to be the difference between this farmer getting paid and this farmer not. So we've tried to kind of advocate for, particularly with that one, drought and excessive heat. You need to kind of just exercise some wisdom and judgment on this. And I think they're going to do that. This will be a really important part of the rule coming out, because you never want matters of judgment by the adjuster to be decisive on how this is treated in this kind of later arrived. This is something that wasn't even enacted till December, so the adjuster wouldn't have known
Right.
that this was coming. So we'll see what they do, particularly on that drought and excessive heat. Pretty much all the other losses, though, I think there's going to be they're going to be able to find a way under the statute to get clear.
Yeah. Because I
So
know in prior ones we had it where if an agent was logging in the claim, where did they choose? Because like you say, we could have had, like last year in our farm, we went from extreme excess moisture to drought at the end. So I mean, what peril do you put down? And it could be the peril that the agent is thinking. Because there were some times where if the agent didn't put something down, then it didn't automatically qualify, from the data that was shared between the RMA and the FSA. So no, I appreciate that. That's going to be well received by both agents and customers. So
There's
yeah.
also kind of a similar issue because this disaster program, this SDRP, is supposed to go by calendar year, so losses in calendar year 23 and 24. And sometimes you might have like a winter wheat crop that was
Yeah.
planted in the fall of 22, and it might have gotten burned out or frozen out, early, but maybe a claim wasn't filed until calendar year 23.
Sure.
And so you can get some discrepancies there. So we've also urged USDA to exercise some flexibility on those kind of calendar year losses as well.
So, so to that point, Tom, you mentioned smoke taint earlier, and then
Yeah.
with that discussion, I'm thinking specialty crops. Is there any nuances that those producers need and those agents need to keep in mind? I mean, talk about crossing calendar years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sure.
Or
Um,
is it just similar? Probably similar guidance, right? Yeah.
similar guidance. And then the really interesting thing on specialty crops is they are given a higher pay limit in these FSA programs, there's always limits. It's
Mhm.
nice that in crop insurance, you don't have to worry about that, right? You have a contract,
Right.
Right.
you're covering so many losses. But in the title, in these FSA delivered disaster programs, for conventional crops, for traditional crops, the limit is 125
Mm.
per farm, but you can double that if more than 3/4 of your income comes from agriculture. So that 125 can go to 250. For specialty crops, if you kind of meet that same threshold of more than X percent of your, more than, I think, 75%, maybe 66. It's either 2/3 or 3/4. I think it's 3/4. But if more than that portion comes from agricultural sources, then your limit goes up to 900,000. Obviously, specialty
Mm.
crops
Oh,
are more
wow.
valuable. You have some
Right.
Mhm.
integrated producers. And so that's the only kind of big difference for specialty crops relative to traditional row crops. They're all covered under this disaster program.
Nice. One of some of the prior programs, there was stuff that your unit structure kind of had a implication on how it was paid out. Do you think there's going to be a similar component with this one?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've been told that this disaster program is going to go down to kind of the unit by unit
Okay.
structure within a farm. It's not going
Mm.
to do a whole farm canceling one thing against another.
Sure.
I am also told it's strictly going to be yield based. So whereas we obviously had a price decline across most of the major row crops in both 23 and 24, sadly. So there were a lot of revenue losses paid out in crop insurance, and that was a huge help and a blessing to so many farm families. What I know of this SDRP program, it's going to go unit by unit, but it's just going to look at the yield loss. So it'll kind of look at the spring price, or the higher of the price between the
Mhm.
spring and the harvest,
Yeah.
and it'll calculate yield losses from that according to these
Okay.
plussed up areas of coverage.
Nice. No, that because I had read somewhere that some of the methodology kind of behind this logic was, hey, the ECAP program kind of took some of the revenue
Yeah,
portion, and that's why this one may be turning more towards yield. So,
that's
so you
exactly.
are confirming what I had read
Yeah,
in the industry. So thank
yeah.
you.
You're welcome.
So as long as we're in kind of these areas I call them nuance, right? So these non-standard areas. So we got like the interactions among these things, row crops versus livestock versus like prevent plant acres, some of those things. Can you just kind of generally talk about how some of those things might be handled?
Yeah, that's
If you're aware and kind of up to speed on some of them, because I know some of those gets pretty specific.
Yeah, they can. And, probably best to, pay good attention to the rule once it comes out. Preventive planting acres do qualify. Um, uh, and I think by using a lot of crop insurance data, that'll be a lot smoother. There's always a disconnect between what farmers might certify at their county level. We ran into some of that in the ECAP program, in fact, and what crop insurance covers on preventive planting. So, it'll be a percent kind of plus up based on, and there will still be a factor. There has been traditionally for the preventive planting, the fact that you don't have all your costs into that program. So it will be factored back based on that PP. On the livestock side, I think the one area that could be complicated, and I would encourage people to really look at, because we've already run out this ELRP, that livestock program is really based on your head counts. So your number of mama cows that are grazing out there, and you count your bulls and all that kind of stuff. And under the FSA programs for LFP, the Livestock Forage Program, you have to justify those head counts by certifying so many acres that would support those animal units. And then kind of on those acres, you might have, annual forage or other things running that could provide some coverage. But the way the FSA is trying to design this, from what I understand, is they don't want to double count acres. They don't want to, if you've used acres to justify these cattle numbers that you were indemnified for under the ELRP, they don't want to use those same acres to justify crop payments. They're supposed to go to the same place. So that's a pretty vague statement, I know, but I just want to encourage your listener to pay close attention to that. Because it's hung some people up in the past, and I know in some areas payments were actually had to be clawed back in past runs of this disaster program.
Yeah, definitely don't want that.
Yeah. Well, it kind of goes to maybe another question. Like, assuming just like any of these, there's maybe some audit process. Is there anything that is known up front with that they're going to audit so many of these policies, or is that maybe
Yeah,
not been
yeah,
worked out?
it's a good question, and that's always a potential problem on the FSA side. And producers, kind of in desperate situations, trying to get all they can, and we all understand that, but I think it's really important to pay attention to the rules. Certainly, FSA does audit so many from farm programs to disaster
Yeah,
programs to everything else. And so you want to just try and follow the rules and do the right thing, not try and get away with one in
sure.
these kinds of programs. It's a generous program, by any
Yeah,
historical standard.
Hmm.
And it's always going to be the right long-term solution to follow the rules, just like in federal crop insurance, where it's an important thing, program integrity. In my world of politics in Washington, D.C., the quickest way to undermine support for any of these programs is having a bunch of people trying to take advantage and bend the rules in ways that aren't really called for by the law. So do the right thing is my admonition.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Great guidance and absolute truth. That is absolutely the case. Speaking of crop insurance, is so like other programs, is there a 2-year crop insurance requirement, or you need to purchase NAP, or you need to participate in some way if crop insurance isn't available, correct?
Yeah, presumably so. That was still in the statute, and I'm expecting
Okay.
there'll still be kind of a minimum buy-up level. And in the past, they actually raised that to 60% for
Mm.
2 years. And I'm expecting there'll be something very similar this time around too.
Nice. Um, One question then too is, if like these applications go out and there's an error, do you know if that's going to be something that can be modified? Because I think in some of the prior programs that was kind of you couldn't. So I don't know if you know any insight on that as far as changes.
Yeah, I'm told that any errors, they'll send kind of a pre-filled application, and FSA has upped their game a little bit
Okay.
on even remote signing. They have this one span network that they're using now, and a lot of farmers are using that. So I think it'll be pretty quick and easy if everything looks right.
Okay.
Um, and this is where I think is, the farmers will work with their agents. They'll kind of review this stuff.
Yeah.
Agents are always great about
Yeah.
Absolutely.
standing by their farmers in these kinds of processes. But if there is an error, there will be a process with the county committee up to the state committees
Okay.
to get those corrected. It takes more time. Sometimes if it's just around the edges, I know a lot of farmers will just be like, you know, I don't want to mess with that. It's close enough. We'll take it and we'll go. Those are judgments that can be made. But there will be a process for correcting.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
So we've broached this a little bit, but I think for certainly our agents listening who might be out there soliciting crop insurance, trying to continue to build relationships, how different is this program? I know time frame is different significantly. Like if you are uninsured currently, I don't think it means you're not eligible, but
Correct.
if you're uninsured, there's different time frames, different process. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So uninsured would also go into that second kind of September round for the unidentified losses, for quality, and then they'll also cover acres that might have been covered by NAPA, non-insured assistance program,
Mm-hmm.
and then acreages that are not insured at all. And typically the thresholds will be lower, so that's kind of the lowest level of help. But right, it's all free. So how can anyone complain? And I think when they publish kind of the schedule, they will have, if you're non-insured, if you had cat and nap will typically have the same kind of level of plus up, and then it'll just go up from there as you bought up in federal crop insurance. So there should be an opportunity for non-insured crops as well. And yeah, that's what we're all looking forward to the rules and kind of getting the full details out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So, for our crop agents, is there anything, the folks who listen to this podcast, is there anything that they need to be as far as their process in their role in this process? I mean, any recommendations you have for crop agents out there?
Well, as always, I mean, the agents, this infrastructure uh, is is such a vital service that's provided for the farmers. And I know it can be frustrating at times because there's a lot of detail here, and it's not like
Mhm.
in this work on a disaster program, there's no real compensation for the time, except it's just a
Right.
building of goodwill with your
Yeah.
customers and kind of cultivating that relationship. And every agent I know, certainly the SEEP agents, they are hungry for this information because they want to serve. They want to provide that.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's a
Yeah.
it's a valuable service to provide to your customers. So I think just paying attention to that detail, and we're going to be providing some information out too through SEPA, through our firm, because it's always good to read a couple of different sources. You get the
Yeah.
FSA bulletins out there, but with all due respect, I have the greatest respect for the folks who work in Washington D.C. and the bureaucrats, but sometimes their explanatory material uh, is not the most straightforward.
Just
We try and isolate that down to the biggest questions that people ask. I'll tell you, RMA also does a great job. RMA, published like an FAQ on these rollouts in the past in 20 and 21 and in 17 and 18 as well, or 18 and 19 in the WIP Plus. And really kudos to Francie Tolley and some of the others Chris Albert, who worked on that very closely. And I expect they will have that Q&A running up again too for agents, especially for running
Nice.
into problems and issues. So we'll try and provide access to those points where questions will be asked and answered. And we also love to do a lot of casework. It helps us understand these programs better when we understand the problems that people are
Yeah.
running into. And so we always invite that kind of input, and y'all are great. It really does, just to show I'm bipartisan. I'll quote Hillary Clinton saying it takes a village, and
Yeah.
and that is kind of what we have in agriculture between the
right.
agents and the companies and the FSA offices. It's always important and we always counsel our agents too. Honey always works better than vinegar. Cultivating a relationship with those FSA offices is important too because they need the help right now. We've all read
Absolutely.
about these cuts and
Mm.
the voluntary retirements, and those
Hmm.
are real. And in a lot of offices, they are pretty dang stressed. Um, and we all know when an office is working well, when one of those FSA county offices working well, it's such a blessing to everyone in that county, including the agents and everyone who's trying to serve those farmers. So come alongside them and encourage them and just help try and get the information out. And I think we can all get through this. It's going to be a really meaningful, impactful program. And from what I'm seeing in the country, I tell you what, a bunch of cash flowing into the countryside, about mid-July is going to be a welcome relief for a lot of farm families on their cash flows.
Yeah, absolutely.
Boy, amen to that. And exceptionally well said, Tom. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate your insight into this program and others. And just wanted to open the floor if you had any closing thoughts or anything that came to mind before we let you go here.
Well, I hope that was helpful, and obviously
Very.
you know where to find me, and so appreciate FMH and the way that y'all engage with agents and farmers across the country. I mean, people say that crop insurance, I mean, these things are great and they're important, but we wouldn't even be here if it weren't for the base level of coverage that federal crop insurance is providing. It is, you know, people refer to it as the cornerstone, as the keystone of the safety net. You know, it's the one that holds everything together these days in terms of risk management for these farm families who, you know, in addition to the market uncertainties, have all the weather uncertainties. So we're so proud of this program and the work that you all do. And so I'm so grateful for the relationship between SEPA and FMH. So really appreciate the opportunity today and hope it was helpful.
It absolutely was, and right back at you. We certainly appreciate the relationship with SEPA, with the agents that are part of SEPA, and a fantastic organization that just we're looking forward to a continued relationship going forward. A very good one.
Thanks, Dave.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it for us today, everybody. Hope you all learned as much as I certainly did, and I think it was a fantastic discussion. I really want to thank Tom again for his insight, willingness to come on the program. Certainly, again in this busy time in DC, in the countryside. I mean, it's a significantly busy time right now, so we really appreciate it, Tom. And Ken, thanks always for co-host duties, farmer duties, customer duties, the duties you have as a regional sales manager, and on and on. So really appreciate you as well, Ken.
Thank you.
And finally, most importantly, thanks to all you listeners, everybody who watches it on YouTube and listens in various podcast applications. As always, remember to like, follow, subscribe so you can pick up these episodes on whatever platform that you listen to or watch podcasts on. And we will see you all next time on FMH InsureCast.
You've been listening to FMH InsureCast. We appreciate you joining us today and would like to hear from you. If you have questions about today's topic or an idea to share for an upcoming podcast, you can contact us at fmhpodcast@fmh.com. Thanks for listening. This podcast is intended for information purposes only. See policy provisions, terms, and conditions for details. Products underwritten by Farmers Mutual Hail Insurance Company of Iowa and its affiliates, West Des Moines, Iowa. Farmers Mutual Hail is an equal opportunity provider.